right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Patricia Meredith, and I am an author of historical mystery. And today I am joined by two fellow mystery authors and mystery readers and lovers. And I'm just so excited for this conversation. So I am joined today by Brook Peterson, over here, Brook Peterson and Sarah Stephen. And we were just discussing where we're all located because we're all in different places. Sarah is in Canada, and Brook is actually near where I used to live in Spokane. So it's pretty cool. We're all in different places now. I'm in Colorado, but it's so neat that we get to do this kind of chat across, miles and kilometers away from each other. So I guess we'll start by I'll have Brook and Sarah introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll dive into talking a little bit more about our works in progress and mystery and all of that. So let's start with Brook.
All right. Well, I'm Brook Peterson, and I write contemporary cozy mysteries. I also have a middle grade mystery that I've recently released, and I am the co-host of Clued In Mystery Podcast with my good friend, Sarah.
Hi, and I'm Sarah. As Patricia mentioned, I'm in Canada. I'm in Vancouver, and I write historical mysteries that, I guess there's a present day element and a historical element to them. And as Brooke said, I co-host the Clued In Mystery Podcast with her.
Yes, and that's how I discovered you two, was through Clued In Mystery. I think you guys had just started out. You were on like Agatha Christie. You had done Sherlock Holmes and maybe one other one, and then you were diving into Agatha Christie. Actually, I might have not found you until Anna Catherine Green, because then I remember chatting with you guys, and that's where we kind of connected, because at the time I was just starting my work on there we go, A Deed of Dreadful Note, which is the first in a series of historical mysteries featuring Anna Catherine Green, who is the mother of detective fiction. And it was so cool to hear you guys talk about her, because I've never heard her mentioned in any of the mystery podcasts that I listen to, even in books and TV series. Usually they'll claim that, Sherlock Holmes was the first to do XYZ. Like, oh no, there's so many before him. So it was so nice to hear you mention her. So I want to talk a little bit more about your current books. I read each of your first books in each of your series. I haven't been able to continue the series yet. It's on my my Christmas list. It's like I'm going to read the rest of these series. So Brook, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your series and where you're at in the series right now?
Cool. Yeah. So my cozy mystery series is the Jericho Falls Cozy Mysteries, and so I finished 3 books. I published the first one independently in December of 2020, and then basically have released a book a year since then. So I just released book 3 this spring. So I am brainstorming number 4. I kind of have some good ideas, but pen hasn't gone to paper yet on that. But I hope to do something similar and bring out book 4 next spring. So this is a mystery set in a fictional town that is really heavily influenced by Virginia City, Nevada. Okay. It's not all Virginia City. It's a conglomerate of different ghost towns that I'm a little bit obsessed with, but it's very heavily influenced by that location. And our main character, Chloe Martin, has always spent summers in this town, but now as an adult, she's returned and mysteries ensue.
Yes. And snarky grandma.
Skunky grandma is kind of the sidekick. Chloe's got several good sidekicks that each kind of fulfill a different role for her, but grandma is her best bud, and they're hilarious.
Yes. Oh, the banter between those two, it's priceless. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
I loved it so much. And now, is that including the Christmas? I thought that was like a novella, right?
That's true. I've got the 3 full-length novels have been released, and then I have 2 holiday novellas. One of them is stuck in a promo right now until October, but it's going to be coming out. And I have another Halloween novella in that world that's going to be coming out this fall. So I really find that, I'm not a fast writer. Obviously, I was maybe a title a year, but I find that doing some of those little novellas is something that I can complete more quickly and still be able to provide something new for readers. So they've been really fun.
exactly. And then, okay, and then you say you have a children's book series, and I didn't know that.
So this is a standalone actually.
Oh,
It's the first novel I ever wrote.
oh,
It's titled The Cameo's Secret, and I started writing it when my daughter was a year and a half and she's 17. So you can see how this went. I wrote this book and it kind of sat. And then I actually met my agent, Cindy Bullard, on Instagram. She was just wanting to start a literary agency. She also writes middle grade mysteries. So really it was a whim. I just like, yeah, do you want to read this? It's been sitting in a drawer. What do you think? And she liked it. She shopped it for me. And, it with trad, it's a long process, but almost 3 years later, it's out. Level Best Books acquired it, and it came out this week actually.
oh,
So
really?
yeah,
Congratulations. That's why I haven't heard of it. Okay.
yeah, it's brand new.
Excellent. What is it? Middle grade or early chapter book or?
Middle grade. The characters are like sixth, seventh, eighth graders.
Okay.
But it is a standalone. I think I learned through the process. I was in a group that was primarily writing for kids, and so that was really the kind of to be in the critique group. You wrote for kids,
Right.
and I love this book. It probably is one of the things I'm most proud of writing, but I also feel like it's not my natural voice. You know how those things that come easy to you. So I
Mhm.
don't see myself writing a lot for middle grade in the future, but it's one of those passion projects. It has a lot of sentimental value to me.
Right, right. And to see it finally out there, that's amazing. That's that's awesome. Congratulations. And
Thank
what
you.
was the title again?
The Cameo's Secret.
Cameo Secret. Okay, excellent. So like cameo, like a
Yes, like a
okay.
necklace.
Okay. So is it historical mystery?
It's not historical, but as many of my books, I think it's fun the things we have in common because
Yeah,
even though I don't write historical, there's almost always like this historical secret that is
exactly.
happening. So
Mhm.
there's a family legend that my main character Jesse has to figure out in order to like save the day, so to speak. So but
Okay,
things hinge on this cameo necklace.
excellent. Okay, perfect. All right. So Sarah, tell us about your books and yeah, I'll let you explain.
Okay, so the premise is that there's a present day archivist, and she's working in a museum, and she discovers the journal that was written by a detective in late 19th century Vancouver, and realizes that the two of them can communicate through this journal. And so she kind of helps him with his police investigations. There's two books out, and the third book is coming out in September.
Excellent. And the name of the series?
Sorry. Yeah. So the name of the series is the Journal Through Time Mysteries. And the first book is The Dead of Falls Creek. And the second is The Hanging at the Hollow Tree. And the third that's coming out is Murder in Mount Pleasant. And those are all places in Vancouver. So it's
Okay.
it's very much set here.
Excellent. Excellent. So do you do lots of hands-on research in Vancouver or?
Well, so I live here, and so I can, go to those places and kind of walk around and get a sense of a feel for, if I'm writing a scene that's set in a particular location. And there's a fabulous police museum here that, I love to just wander around and kind of poke around some of the exhibits and some of the information that they have. So that gives me a bit of context for the police character in the 19th century.
Perfect. And then I forget if are they based on real mysteries or are you making up the mysteries?
I'm making up the
Yeah.
mysteries.
Yeah.
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 Then you have more control. You can
Well, yeah, and I do take a little bit of, it's fiction, so I take a little bit of creative license,
Mhm.
and although the settings are real, I've used different names for, it's not I call it the Vancouver Constabulary. It's the Vancouver Police Department in real life,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the railroad that they are talking about is has a slightly different name to the one that was very prominent in building the city, in the late 19th century.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I loved the idea of the dual timeline, and it is interesting how Brooke kind of has that with the having to talk to the I forget your grandma's the good grandma character's name.
She's Lily.
Lily, yeah. So whenever Chloe is going to talk to Lily and they're uncovering, past secrets and things like that. And then there's the dual timeline with your series. And I didn't know what to expect with either of yours when I dove into them. I just knew they were mystery, but I couldn't remember if they were historical mystery or what. And so it was really interesting. I think I read Brooks first, and then I read Sarah's. And it threw me, Sarah, when it switched, and I was like, oh, this was dual timeline. Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, so they're really fun. They're so well written. I really enjoyed both of them. They're really, really good. So
Thank you so much.
yeah, well, and so what are you guys working on now? Let's see. Brooke said you're working on kind of thinking about book 4, right? And then Sarah, are you working on another one in that series, or are you going to start a new one?
Yeah, so I've got loads of ideas, and I have kind of notes and I'm going to say a really rough first draft for book 4, and my aim is to get that out next year. I'm like Brooke. I'm not. I think one book a year is probably my sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I'm really starting to turn my attention to that 4th book.
Yeah, I've been trying to do 2 a year, but I'm starting to realize I think that's too many for me. I'm homeschooling, and it's just been, it's been and life events moving and everything. And it's just like, man, I feel like I'm really I'm working on a Christmas cozy mystery to release this year because it's the 200th anniversary of the release of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. The poem was published in 1823. So I was like, ooh, that kind of ties in with like history and everything. And so I'd love to I've had this idea for a Christmas mystery for a while, and so I'd love to get it done, but we'll see if it comes to fruition or not. So, yeah.
That sounds like so much fun. And I have to say, Patricia, I love your books. I've
Oh, thank you.
really, really enjoyed the characters that you've created.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I might have read it first, and then I was like, "Oh, Sarah, you've got to read Patricia's books. These are really good." Yeah, I did,
Yeah.
and I knew that they would be kind of right up Sarah's alley because of, um, you know, similar timeline, or sorry, similar time periods,
Yeah.
kind of similar areas of the world. That was what was going on in that era, and I was like, "Oh, you've got to read these. These are really good."
Excellent. Yeah, actually, in the 4th one, we might be referencing some things that happened in Canada that came down to Spokane. So it'll be fun to see the crossover, what happens.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's see, just checking comments real quick. So I wanted to ask you guys about your process. Like, do you guys have you both kind of mentioned you have like a list of, ideas. So here are all my ideas. How do you pick which idea to work on? You both have steady series, so you're continuing a series. Do you find that it's easier to continue a series rather than starting a new one? Or, yeah, that's a couple different questions. Choose which one.
Well, in working on the series, and of course, this is a first for me, right? I've never done this before, but I find that somewhere along the end of like book 3, for instance, I started to like, oh, I think I know what could happen in book 4. And then I just kind of start brainstorming, and I just have, just some notes. I have a really great couple of critique partners. They're not mystery authors, oddly enough. I know some people prefer to just work in their genre for critiques, but these are people I've known for years. And I'll kind of bounce some things off them. I'm like, I'm thinking that Chloe's going to do this. What do you guys think? And then sometimes they can give me some ideas too. And I can't remember the second part of your question.
Just your process. So like how you decide what's your next.
Yeah. So I think that is, I'm kind of coming to understand how that process works for me, because it is the first time I've written in a series. I think that writing in a series for me is both, there's like the pros and the cons, because now that I know my people and I know my world, it's easier in a lot of ways. Like I know, like, oh, Bree would never say that. I gotta fix that. She would
Right.
never talk like that or whatever.
Mhm.
But there I do see that there's gonna come a time where I'm gonna kinda need a break from Jericho Falls,
Yeah. Mhm.
and we'll need some sort of a palate cleanser, I
Mhm.
think, to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
And I suppose that that's where people who are farther down in their career, we're almost all at the exact same place.
Yeah. Yep.
That, that's where it's when it's time to probably start a different series or maybe write a standalone or something
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. How about you, Sarah?
Um, yeah, so I don't know. I write down kind of ideas as they come. And I think about two other books for Jack and Riley, who are my characters in my series. I think I've got two other books for sure that I you know have mysteries both in present day and in the past and that they can be working on. Um, but I also have a bunch of drafts of other things that I've written, right? I've got um I don't know how many ideas and how many drafts in just
Right.
a contemporary mystery series that,
Okay.
you know, in this burst of creativity, I just like was pouring out these words, but I haven't done anything with them.
Okay.
And I've got a couple of drafts in, I think, one or two different um, children's stories, like middle grade probably, that I've written that I would like to do something with at some point. But
Mhm.
for me, it's a time thing. I just,
Yeah.
I have a full-time job. I don't,
Mhm.
um, I would love to be writing all of the time, but I just don't have that time. Um, so yeah, at some point there will be something else, but I don't know when that will be.
Yeah. But in the meantime, it's fun to continue those series. I've found that I really enjoy coming back to those characters. Like I started missing my characters in the
Mhm.
Spokane one, because I wrote all three of them and I published them all together, and that's kind of how I'm going to pursue the rest of the series. It's a 12 to 13 book
Oh,
series is what I
wow.
have planned
Oh,
for.
wow.
So yeah, because it's a book a month of them building the clock tower, and it took a year for them to build the clock tower. And so I've got April, May, June, and then I'm working on July, and that helps me because it's historical. I'm able to flip through newspaper articles and find, okay, so what's really happening in July. So like July is going to be primarily baseball and gambling, which is a fun crossover. But just seeing, okay, so here's the things that are happening in Spokane, and then I can feature something different about Spokane's history in each one. But it's primarily character driven. I really love the characters, and so I love coming back to them and seeing what they've been up to in my absence. So, how about you guys? Do you primarily focus on your characters, or do you like focusing on the plot or the setting, or what's your primary?
Well, first I have to say that I'm super excited about baseball in that era, which was
Yeah.
huge in our whole Northwest area. So
Yes.
maybe there'll be some mention of the Idaho League. That would make me so happy. But anyway, I don't know what you asked me. I got all combobulated with baseball.
That's okay. Actually, I don't remember what I asked. Oh. Are you character driven, plot driven, or setting driven? Can you write?
I think mostly character driven for me. I'm a pantser
Okay.
essentially. So I usually start out with like some sort of interesting situation to put Chloe in, and then I just follow Chloe. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, what would Chloe do? Where would we go next?
Right.
Uh, but that being said, there usually is a turning point about midway where I think, okay, I've got to get this nailed down. And because, plot and structure are so important obviously in a mystery that
Mhm.
I want to make sure that there aren't any holes or any big holes, and that I get those nailed down before I write clear to the end, because then we've all been there where there's a lot of cleanup to do back at the beginning, and that's never fun. So I think I'm getting better as I go along to uh start plotting that end part out and making sure things are tied up before I just make a big mess and then have to go clean up.
Okay. So you don't start with the ending.
I don't. I don't know who I usually don't know who the culprit is
Really?
until pretty far in. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Which, people I think get surprised that you can write a mystery as a pantser.
Yeah.
Um, but you can, and but it does require some cleanup at times.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the painful process.
Yeah. But honestly, it's the same because I write backward, forward. I weave together. I start with my ending, so I know how it's all going to end, and then, in fact, I usually even write the denouement, the very ending where the criminal reveals his foul plan or whatever. So I'll write that first because then I can sprinkle clues throughout it. But inevitably, I still have to go back and clean it up.
Yeah.
So it's not like it saves me anything. So
Does your Does your denouement ever change? I mean, maybe not the murderer, but, like, some factors in it
in the
because of
first
what you
one,
learn?
yes.
Yeah.
The first one was more of a I had a really early draft. So Butcher Baker is what I'm talking about. Butcher Baker Candlestick Taker was the hardest one to figure out because it was my very first one, and it was based on an earlier draft that was completely different. It was more fantastical realism. It was very different. And then I landed on historical mystery and tied it all in. But along the way, some of the characters changed. So
Mhm.
Eleanor changed primarily during the writing of the book, and I won't give any spoilers, but she's one of the main characters who is very different, and then the ending is I did not see that coming, and it ended up completely changing. I had to go back and rewrite the whole book, but then that moves forward into the rest of the series. So that's what made writing book two, like writing book one took, I mean, honestly, it took 7 years because if I go from the very first draft to the very end, to publication, it was about 7 years. But the second book took me a year, and the third one took me 6 months because then I was in a groove and I knew what I wanted and I knew the characters, I knew where I was going. So it was a little bit easier. But so, how about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm like Brooke in that I kind of more discover as I go along.
Okay.
Um, so when I start out though, I have an idea of what the crime will be that they're
Cool.
investigating.
Okay.
Um, but sometimes something else sneaks in.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I think when I start out, it feels like it's been a long time since I've written uh like sat down and drafted because I kind of do it in different seasons, right? So,
Yeah.
and in this series, yeah, it feels like it's been a long time. But yeah, I typically am inspired by something that I've read or something that I've seen. And I figure out how can I make that, could that have happened in Vancouver? Could
Right.
that have happened in Vancouver when Jack was a police detective, right?
Mhm.
Um, and uh, so the so I try and make sure that that kind of all works out. And then yeah, I kind of figure out, okay, well, how are these two characters going to interact and how are they going to solve this mystery and who sometimes I know who the bad guy is and sometimes I don't or it changes. So
Okay.
yeah, I think that's one of the things that I'm working through, as I'm looking at my notes for book 4. I don't think I have a clear sense of like who's really behind this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, with this Christmas one that I've been writing, I have been trying to do it in a different way, and I think I need to realize that no, the way I do it is fine. I need to just stick with what works for me, because I kind of started by discovery writing, and I don't normally do that. So I ended up about a quarter of the way into the book and was like, nope, I have to make an outline. This is not working for me because I don't know where I'm going with this. So I
Yeah,
stopped, outlined the whole thing, got to the ending, wrote my ending, and then now I'm back at the beginning, working forward, because I'm definitely an outliner. So it's really interesting how you talk to other authors and realize, no, that it really is. It depends on the person. It depends on the series. It depends on what you're writing, what you're interested in, and but
totally.
yeah, it's just it's fascinating. So,
It
Well,
really
and
is.
I
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Sarah.
Brooke. I what I often will do is like when I'm drafting and I'm just like essentially spitting words out, then I go back and I create an outline. It's almost like what I've written is just a very long outline because it might be my first draft might be 40,000 words.
Okay.
And then I just add, right? I'm like, okay, there needs to be more about this here. There needs to be this other thing that happens before I can get to this thing.
Mhm.
And that's how I piece it all together.
Mhm.
But I don't think I could start out and say, okay, I'm going to write 20 chapters and this is going to happen in chapter 1. This is going to happen in chapter
Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
I don't think that would work for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I know that works. I mean, it sounds like that's kind of,
Well, I don't do it by chapter. It's more by beats. You know how you have
yeah,
that
yeah,
feeling? Just the more you write, the more you can just naturally feel it.
yeah.
And so I tend to just kind of like, because like in the Spokane series, there's no chapters. It's by day. And so it's and then broken by POV. And so in those ones, I'm more juggling, making sure that it's not, constantly Thomas and Bernard going back and forth. And especially if
Mhm.
they're in the same place. I don't want them constantly just them. I want to break it up with, okay, well, what's Archie doing at the same time? What's Marion doing? And then that's where it was fun, was like in book 2, switching up the pairs, right? Who's working with who. So it's very much an ensemble cast. And I think of it a lot like a lot of TV shows that I love, like Murdoch Mysteries is one of my favorite, and that's set in Canada. I love that series. And that's the time period and everything. In fact, have you watched that series?
I actually haven't.
No. I
I
highly
know it's
recommend it.
super, super popular, but
Yeah.
it's one of those ones that, yeah, I've never
Yeah.
watched it.
Yeah, I love it. I love the TV series actually more than the books, which is like taboo to say, but I do. I feel like the TV series is not quite as dark.
Mm,
The books can get a little bit grim, a little dark in some of their subject matter, but the TV series tries to really lighten it all up. It's very
yeah.
comedic and it's really good. It's one of those, I would say the first season is the roughest, but once you can get over the first season and the characters, it's like Leverage. Leverage was really rough the first season, but then once you fall in love with the characters, it's just easy sailing from then on. So yeah. So how about you, Brooke? Do you do chapters? Do you plan out your chapters, or when going back into your draft?
So, as Sarah said, we discovered that we share this thing in common where we do our draft and then we go back and we outline the draft that we made.
Yeah.
So then that becomes like it's like a reverse engineering outline, and then I can see where like you said, the beats, like the
Mhm.
things that I'm missing or the things that need to be added back in or whatever. So I do that same thing, and I don't pre-plan my chapters except for just kind of this vague sense like, okay, I'm about 25% in,
Yeah.
like, have these things happened? Do we have enough tension, And then, okay, it's I write my books generally are about 65,000, maybe 70,000 words. So, I'm about halfway. Are we going to get to the big switch? So
Right.
I think there's a lot of intuition and like you said, Patricia, the more times you do it,
Mhm.
part of it's just being a fan and
Yeah.
having
Mhm.
read a million of them and watched a million of them.
Mhm.
But then when you're trying to do it yourself, I do think the more times you do it, the more feel you get for it. So
Mhm.
that's really fun. I wish that I always want to be like you. I want to be like, this is how I write a book.
Yeah.
And I do this outline and then I write the end and then I write the begin. Like that's what I want to be when I
Mhm.
grow up, but it probably is never going to happen. And it's what
No,
you said, like just do what you do
exactly.
and don't worry about it. It works.
Right.
And it doesn't have to look like the way someone else does it.
Exactly. Exactly. And so many people get bogged down in that, right? When you start talking to new authors, especially, okay, well, how do I write a book? Well, there is no one and done way to do it. It's really you just have to do it a lot and be willing to finish them. That's the other thing I have a friend who is working on like he's working on this book and then he gets almost done with it and then moves on to this new idea. It's like, okay, so finish it. Let's finish it because then we can fix it, right? And I think that's part of it is so many people are afraid of the editing process. And I actually love the revision process because it's like, okay, the first draft is done. I feel like the first draft is the hardest part. is just getting those words out there, getting the basic structure out there, and then, having somebody read it. And I read mine aloud to my husband, and then we work through it. And then I have my editor. He's also the alpha reader. And we're just looking for the basic structure problems, right? And then I love that next step, because then it's okay. Now it's out there, and now I can fix it. Because when it's in my head, I have an idea of where it's going, but I'm not necessarily sure it's going to come across that way. Or, did I forget all the hints that I had planned on dropping, for the murder? Can you solve it too quickly? There's always that balance too with writing mystery specifically, is, finding that balance between I want the reader to get it, but like just before my characters do. So how about you guys?
What's your question, Patricia?
So let's see. What specifically is my question? Do you? I don't know. Just writing mystery. What do you find is your favorite part of writing mystery?
I mean, I like all of it. Like
Yeah.
I really like when I'm kind of in that drafting mode, and I can do that. Like I'll, make some notes on my phone when I'm waiting for my son to come home from school, and, I'm waiting at the bus stop for him. Or if, I used to commute to work, and I would, that's how I actually drafted my first book, was largely, it was just on my commute on my phone.
Wow.
And so I love that, because on my way to work, I'm thinking about it. On my way home, I'm thinking about it, and kind of setting up whatever the next scene is going to be, so that when I, get on the bus the next morning, I can continue, right? So I really like that. I feel like there's a lot of energy, or I get a lot of energy from that process.
Mhm.
But I also, like you said, I enjoy the editing process, kind of going back and rereading something. It's often been several months by the time I get to reread it, and I think, oh, you know what, some of this is going to work, some of this needs to totally change. But yeah, I'm excited reading this, and I can do something with this, right? Yeah, no, I like all of that process.
Mhm. Mhm. How about you, Brooke?
I think editing, once my structural edits are over, although that's pretty fun too, because probably by then I've figured out, like, oh, okay, I know how that's all going to come together. So
Mhm.
just the editing process. First draft is hard for me.
Mhm.
I do a lot of overthinking and like trying to get it's the what you were describing about your friends who don't finish things. It's
Mhm.
that thing that you do to yourself where it's like, well, this is a mess. I can't even go
Yeah.
on because it's such a disaster. But you just have to push through and keep writing. And I think that you had great advice, because until you finish something, I really feel like once you finish a first draft, I think you can call yourself an author, because
Mhm.
so few of us go through and write the whole story. And not even if it's a mess, not, just getting that first draft out, I think then you can wear that badge, because that is a hard process, and it's a lot of mental work with yourself. Just like I was saying, I have to just keep telling myself to just keep going and don't think about the fact that everything doesn't line up yet. It's going to get there in the next step. And that's why I think I like editing so much, because I can then start smoothing it all out.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. Well, and Sarah, like you said, where you give yourself a couple months in between, I feel like that really helps, right? That if I can have a little bit of distance from it, it helps me have a fresher look at it. I'm not as attached to it, right? I didn't just
Yeah,
finish,
exactly.
finish this. So then you can have a little bit of space, and then you come back to it, and you're like, okay, now I can see how I can fix this. Now I can see where I need to drop those things, and make this character stronger, or things like that. Did you find that you had to kind of build up calluses for hearing a critique? And like, how did you do that? Do you use beta readers? Did you just wait until you put it out there and then get reviews and, cross your fingers? Or what was that like for you guys?
So I have a really strange process. Like I mentioned, my two friends that I'm in this critique group with. This group was going on back when I said I was starting to write The Cameo Secret, and it was a group of about 6 or 8 people. And a friend of mine who was a very successful children's book author. Her name's Judy Cox. She did primarily picture books, and she started this group. And the routine is you write, and what you write that week, you bring it to group and you read it aloud, and then you workshop it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's reading your draft as you write it to,
Wow.
your work in progress, just reading it aloud, what you
Yeah.
wrote that week. And I know that there's a lot of people who will say, I never let anyone read my stuff until, I've polished the first draft or whatever. But this was the process that I kind of
Yeah.
came up on.
Mhm.
And so there's still 2 of us that get together weekly, and we continue that process. So, I think, like you said, building those calluses, that process, I mean, I would be in a cold sweat when I would go to this group 10 years ago,
Mhm.
with these really great writers, people who'd been published for a while. And
Yeah.
I'd be like sweating and worried and not wanting to read. And everyone was kind. We always had rules about how we presented things,
Mhm.
but they also didn't hold back. I mean, they would just,
Mhm.
tell you honestly what you were missing or what they didn't understand. And I think that really helped me to get used to that.
Mhm.
And so, and also, with 6 or 8 people, we all had a different opinion about,
Right.
I want more description. This isn't enough description. So you understand that when you get a bad review, that's one person's opinion, and you have to balance that with what other people think too.
Exactly. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I had a similar experience. So I did a creative writing certificate through one of the local universities here. Um, and part of that program, we did classes. So we talked about like the craft of writing,
Mhm.
but a big component of the program was workshopping our work.
Mhm.
And so we were in smaller groups. I think there were 9 of us in my group, plus our group leader, and we had to submit work on I think it was every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. Um, my work would be reviewed and kind of like Brooke was saying, right? Like everyone would provide their feedback.
Mhm.
And yeah, some of it was like, well, I don't, you know, you guys don't know my characters. I know my characters. It
Right.
took me it took me a moment to kind of, understand where they were where they were coming from. And if they're not seeing think what I want them to see, then I need to do something about that
Mhm.
on the page, right?
Mhm.
Because I know them really well in my head. But
Mhm.
if someone else is reading it and not picking up what I think what they should get, well, then I need to take a look at how can I make sure that that's in there.
Mhm.
So that was invaluable, and that was so I workshopped my first book as part of that creative writing certificate, and yeah, that was super useful. And now I have a couple of people that are kind of early readers, and get some feedback from them, and then of course I go through the whole editing process, and so I still doing structural edits, and then
Mhm.
the copy or line editing, and then proofreading.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That defensive feeling, right? You kind of have to. You hit a point eventually where it's not as reactive. I think.
Yeah.
Like you said, we're all on our third or fourth book, and so there's a point. But it took until probably my third book before that really the immediate reaction went away, and it still depends on like who it is who's giving the reaction. But getting to that point where you're like, okay, I can take that. And I've gotten to a point where I have enough beta readers. I have about 10 steady ones, plus my 2 alpha readers, which is my husband and my editor. And then these 10 other people. And I've been able to kind of figure out, I start like in this last one, when writing the Adita Dreadful Note, I can hear their voices in my head now. I'm like, oh, no,
Oh,
Susan, I have
interesting.
a comment on this. Yep. no. Corin's going to say, no, that's not enough description, or no, not going to like that. So, so that is helpful. But then also knowing, okay, well, this person is probably going to say that I need more description. This person is going to say too much description, focus more on the dialogue. And, being able to then go through those comments with with an open mind. And then one of the biggest things I learned right in the first one was, basically, if one person would say something, I would go ahead and I would start editing it based on that one person's remarks. And then the second person would answer and say the exact opposite. I was like, oh, wait, okay. So I had to realize that I needed to wait until, several people had mentioned it. And I basically have if one person mentions it and I disagree as the author, I'm allowed to do that. But I still make a note of it and I put it to the side, right? When a second person comments on it, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to kill my darlings. It's, maybe this is for the best. And then when the third person comments on it, it's like, okay, no, this is probably something that needs to change, right? Something is not working with this character, or I had one character that I had to completely rewrite in the second one that my editor mentioned in the very alpha read something. And, but it took a couple more betas mentioning it that I was like, okay, no, he's right. As always, your editor is usually right. So, but yeah. So are you guys both traditional published? Now, you said your first one was indie, Brooke, but
yeah. So my my cozy series is indie, but the middle grade is traditional. So just this week, I'm officially a hybrid author.
awesome.
But I'm a very proud indie. I'll continue to write Jericho Falls as an indie author, and I always want to have some indie. I think the bulk of my projects, I say, will be indie, but I'm not opposed to pitching things. I think the middle grade was a good example of the marketing and the promo is going to be so different than the audience for my adult stuff. I think it was a good one to kind of hand off to have a little bit of assistance. I have no idea how that process is going to work, but we'll go forward from there.
And then Sarah, are you indie or traditional?
Yeah. So my series is indie.
Okay.
I think the children's stories that I've been working on, I think I would try and pitch those to get those traditionally published for the reasons that Brooke just mentioned, right?
Exactly,
I think it's just a totally different thing.
Exactly.
But and I'm if there's an opportunity, I'm certainly I wouldn't be opposed to that for something future.
Right. And I feel like, I think both of you said 2020 was kind of when you started, right? Is that when you started, Sarah?
I can't remember. I think my first book came out in 2021.
Yeah. But you were working on the process then in 2020. Yeah. And
well before then.
And well before that. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the same as my story. I feel like in 2020, the publishing market changed, right? It turned itself on its head. I had an agent, and then all the publishers went dark, and it was like, nope. And I was like, no, I'm not going to wait. And the more I got into the traditional process, the more, and my background is as an editor. I worked as an editor for science fiction and fantasy. So I had seen the process from the traditional side, and I was like, I don't really want to do indie because I know how much work it's going to be. But then in 2020, everything changed, and it became, well, I know the process, so why wouldn't I do it myself? And the more traditionally published authors that I talked to, they were like, yeah, if I had to do it again, I would do it indie. Because you just have more control over your work and over your art. I mean, because it's an art process. But yeah, I love being indie. When I look at the publishing industry right now, I feel like I'm really glad I got in on it in 2020 when it first just kind of started changing. Because before that, there was a stigma, right, of self-published works, and they're badly edited and bad covers and things like that. And now we're seeing the exact opposite. You're getting a lot of not very good things from the traditional published, and indie is blossoming. And I think that's because a lot of indie authors went into it saying, well, but I want to be treated like a traditional published book, right? And so for you guys, you have excellent covers. You have excellent layout. It's very professional, and so it reads like you would be surprised to learn. That's why I had to ask you if you were indie. I honestly didn't know, and that's like the best. I love it when people say that about my book,
Mhm.
right? It's like, oh, that's such a compliment. I love
Mhm.
can't tell, right? And that's the goal. It shouldn't be about are you traditional or are you hybrid or are you indie. It should be, is it a good story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, is it a good product? And I think the tools that we have, at our as resources now as indies, our tools have gotten so much bigger,
Yeah,
and better and easier to access. So we can produce a product that is, you know, you can't tell the difference between one that came from a publishing house and one that is indie, as long as you put the work in, like you say.
right. Yes.
You do the right kind of artwork and you get the editing done, and you still have to work really hard, but yeah, you can, and I think readers don't really care or know,
No, exactly. Yeah.
as long as you have that good product.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that was part of the change, right? Was indie authors realizing, well, if I produce a good product, readers don't care. Right.
Mhm.
So the lie that, oh, you have to be traditional in order to be picked up or, anything like that. Because of the ebook too, that really changed, I
Mhm.
think,
Yeah.
everything. So I realized we're already at 46 minutes and I haven't asked you about the podcast. I really wanted to ask you, like, how did that come to be? How did you guys meet, and how did the Clued In Mystery podcast get started?
Well, I'll let Sarah tell the story
Okay.
because I think she reached out to me, so we'll see. But I want to hear her story.
Yeah, so Brooke's right. I did reach out to her through Instagram. I don't remember, Brooke, if I'd read your book. I probably had read your book already. And I don't know, there was just something about your personality on Instagram that I was like, well, maybe she wants to do a podcast with me, because I had kind of been thinking about, okay, how can I love mystery. How can I talk about this?
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
Um, and yeah, so I just sent her a message, and I really was like, oh, what if she's like, no, you're a complete stranger. I'm not doing anything with you. But I sent her, slid into her DMs and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a podcast? And like almost right away, you said yes. And then we, agreed to meet. And so I think every Friday for the last 2 years, we've been,
Yep.
almost 2 years, we've been meeting. And it was really fun to kind of come up with the loose premise for the podcast, like how we wanted to structure it and the kinds of things that we wanted to talk about, what we wanted to call it. I think we went back and forth we had quite a long list of possible names before we landed on Clued In. And yeah, I think we started in February of 2022. Is that
Mhm.
right? I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so really, we've only been doing it for a year and a half, but it feels like we've been
Yeah.
Yeah.
doing it for a long time. But it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it's like, I'm not saying that, saying like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for so long.
Right.
It's
Yeah, and when I got the message from Sarah on Instagram, it was so weird because for the past week or 2 before then, I was kicking around like, I would really love to do a podcast. It's like one of those bucket list things for me,
Mhm.
and I love listening to podcasts, and I was kicking it around thinking, "Oh, but I don't know if I could do it by myself, there's a lot to," and then that came out. So it's just one of those really cool things that happen. And yeah, it's been great. It's been fun. We always say that Fridays are our favorite day because we get to geek out about mystery together.
I love
yeah.
it. Well, and you guys do such good research, right? You always start with, explaining what you're going to talk about. Spy thrillers. What do I mean by that? And what are some examples? And I love that. I love the history side of it, and then hear you guys just discuss. And you've had some great interviews with other authors, and yeah. So how have you been finding those connections? Have you just been on Instagram? You're just like, oh, I want to reach out to this person and just see what they
Just
say.
mostly, yeah, just
Yeah.
reaching out to people.
Mhm.
And I think we've we maybe had one very early on, one person say that they weren't interested, but everybody else has been, gracious enough to come and join us, and it's been loads of fun to just talk about mystery. And I feel like, and I know Brooke, we've said this before on the podcast, like I've learned so much, but there still feels like there's so much more to learn.
Yeah.
And like some of those earlier episodes, I almost want to redo some of them because I feel like I've learned even more about the
Yeah.
history of various genres or whatever.
Mhm.
So we may do some of that, kind of go
Yeah.
back and say,
Oh,
we
absolutely.
talked about this, but there's we found this other resource that had this whole other
Right.
Yeah.
whole other take, or found this other author that I hadn't heard of before, but it is someone that people should think about if they're looking to read one
Right.
of these kinds of books. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we really approach the show as fans of the genre, which I think
Mhm.
we've made clear, but so it's not that we're talking about it as mystery authors, but as
Mhm.
mystery fans. And one thing that Sarah and I both wanted to do, which definitely informs our work, but just because we're fans, is learn about the beginnings and learn about the people, like you were saying, Anna Catherine Green, and some of these people, these names you've heard, but you don't really know, or I probably should have read some of that and I never have. And
Yeah.
so we just that's where what we started with that first season. And I agree, we'll probably want to revisit some of those. And
Mhm.
and there are other names, right? There are other
Mhm.
authors. You start to once you open this Pandora's box, there's so much about the genre that we didn't know, and it's just a huge education for us, and we have a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you keep adding to my TBR. I keep discovering new ones. That's the
It's
best
never
part,
ending.
right?
Oh,
Yeah. Is finding all these great new authors to discover new ones, contemporary ones and historical ones. So yeah,
mhm.
yeah, that's so cool. That's so neat that it's just a happenstance. That's yeah, and then you guys are recording in two different places. So again, thank you technology for changing over 2020,
For
right?
sure.
So,
Oh, absolutely. I don't know how we would have done it,
yeah,
you know, um, thanks to the pandemic.
yeah, yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah, I think it just made that so much more possible, and there's loads of tools that we can use to make it easier.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, and same goes with the guests. I mean, we've had guests all over the world. Uh, w- Mark Grinside was he in South Africa when we interviewed him?
Malta, I think.
Malta, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just been really fun. And
oh,
speaking of guests, I have been starstruck several times and
yeah,
so thrilled that, we thought, well, we're a brand new podcast. They probably won't say yes, but, they are just people too. And a lot, Sarah Rosette, I was very fangirly that day. And Kemper Donovan, that was a super huge thrill. And I could go on and on. There's a lot of people that have come on that I just feel really, really grateful.
that's so cool. That's so cool. And I think in the end, we like talking about mystery, right? It's a chance to geek out, like you said. It's just geeking out over mystery. So what
Mhm.
author doesn't enjoy talking about their genre or their work and
Yeah.
yeah, and all of that. So it's so cool. So yeah, and so if anybody is watching who would like to find them, so Clued in Mystery is a podcast through your website primarily, right? And then also on YouTube, you can listen to it here, and it's just wonderful. It's every Friday, right? Is the new one?
We record on Fridays, but the episodes come out on Tuesdays. We're
On
taking a bit of
Tuesday,
a break over the summer, so we're not every week over the summer.
right?
But it's also on like any podcast app.
Okay,
You should be able to search for us and find it.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, we'll have, I don't know, new episodes coming at the beginning of September, I think, Brooke.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. We always, at the end of each season, we share what our TBR list is during our little hiatus. And so we're both working on reading a lot of mysteries right now. And so our first episode, starting back in the fall, will be our recap of what we read and if we recommend it and things like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, did you have any other things you wanted to discuss, or we'll go ahead and wrap up? And so, why don't you tell us? what you're working on right now and where we can find you. And like Brooke, you said you had a book release this week. So
Yeah. So new book, The Cameo Secret, is out now, and I'm polishing up a Halloween novella to release hopefully for the spooky season. And you can learn all about me at brookpetersonauthor.com.
And yeah, I'm working on, well, the third book in my series will be coming out in September. That's Murder in Mount Pleasant. And then I'll be turning my attention to book 4 in that series. And my website is sarahmsteven.ca.
Perfect. And then down below, I've got their Instagram followers. Anyway, all of that. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you so much, Brooke and Sarah, for joining me today.
Thank you, Patricia.
I'm
Thank
so
you.
honored to meet you.
Yeah,
So
this was lots of fun. So thank you so much for inviting us.
well,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. So be sure to check out all of our books. They're all available everywhere, pretty much in all formats. Do you guys have audiobooks?
I have some.
Some. Okay.
I don't have any yet. That's my next step, is to get some audiobooks out. Yeah.
That's primarily how I've been reading books lately. It's just been,
Me too. Yeah.
We love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So check out the podcast. It's wonderful listening, and they're pretty short. They're usually, I guess sometimes they're longer ones, but
20 to 30 minutes. Yeah.
Which I consider short. There's some podcasts I listen to, they're like an hour and a half long. So
perfect for when you're doing your chores.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And I always, it's like either I do a podcast or I do a book. So it's like juggling between the two. So, so thank you again for joining us. And I'll see you all next weekend. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to all of our things, and enjoy reading mystery, and let us know what you're enjoying reading right now. So thank you, everybody.
Bye.